welcome to our panel discussion on discerning nonprofit careers. I'm joined today by two panelists who both hold doctorates and who have worked extensively both in the nonprofit sectors and in academia. On the panel today, we have Lily Peasley, Professor of Political Science at James Madison University, and Connie LaFuente, Program Analyst at the Carnegie Corporation of New York and Adjunct Instructor at the Teachers College. We also on the call have Sarah Sands, Instructional Associate Professor of Public Administration at the University of Houston, who will be here representing the APSA-related group on civil society, policy, and power, who's co-sponsoring this panel discussion. I'm William Obrochta, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas Lutheran University and the Director of Professional Development for the APSA Civic Engagement section, and I'll be moderating the panel. Our goal today is to explore and start thinking about potential careers in nonprofit organizations. Our hope is that this panel will help viewers evaluate whether these kinds of careers are a good fit for them, how they might bridge academic and nonprofit careers, and what their interests might be and how they might align in this space. So I thought we would just kind of start off with giving some descriptions, Lily and Connie, about your experience and your path and career journey from kind of beginning to think about this space to your current position. So Lily, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. So as William said, right now I'm a professor at JMU. I also am newly an associate director of a Madison Center for Community Development, which works with community organizations, nonprofits, and local government. And so that's the context I'm in now. When I first started this journey, I actually really thought I would just end up in a nonprofit or maybe a think tank. I graduated from the University of Vermont with my undergraduate degree in political science and philosophy, and very quickly was attracted to some of the smaller nonprofits in Vermont, where I'm from, but didn't have great experience. And so I actually ended up participating in AmeriCorps for 2 years. And that was how I gained entry into the fields that I was interested in, which was at a small nonprofit doing anti-hunger work that was centered around kids' hunger needs. I worked there for a while. It was incredibly fulfilling, doing community organizing, working with our local legislature to expand resources for communities. But really quickly, I was feeling like a lot of what we were doing was putting a Band-Aid on a problem, right, in terms of thinking about income inequality and human resource needs. And so I decided I wanted to go back to school, initially to get a master's, and didn't really think about a PhD until I had applied to some programs and was told I could get it paid for if I did a PhD. So prior to that, I wasn't really familiar beyond like being an undergraduate in terms of what academia was about. I didn't really know anyone with a PhD, or at least that I knew had a PhD. And so I went to Brandeis. I have a joint PhD in politics and social policy, and it took me a long time because I wasn't really that committed to the idea of a PhD, but had some great opportunities to do applied research through one of the centers at Brandeis, working on program evaluation around children, youth, and communities. And so that really got me attracted, I think, to this bridge between academia and the nonprofit sector and applied research. And so that's a lot of what I do right now. I teach traditional academic classes, both in an undergraduate program in public policy and also a master's of public administration program. A lot of my time is spent working with local governments and nonprofits to really try to enhance their capacity for things like grant seeking, evidence-based programming, and program evaluation. And so I think for me, it's that connection that's really kept me in academia. I think if I was doing more traditional academic work, I wouldn't still be here, but I've been at JMU for about 15 years now. And for about 12 of them really played this role, not through the center, but through a lot of my service work and also research that's been improved communities. It hasn't been oriented towards other academics.
Connie, what about your journey?
Sure. Some similarities with Lily, I would say. So I am originally from Argentina in Latin America. I did my bachelor's in political science there. Many of my classmates ended up being either politicians or working for the government. I when I completed my bachelor's, I didn't think that working for the public sector in Argentina was a good fit for me. And also working in politics was not something that I wanted to do as well. And so actually by chance, I volunteered in a local nonprofit, in an education nonprofit. And in those days, this was the mid-90s. Argentina had in mid-1980s transitioned to a democratic government. So there was a lot of there were many new NGOs, nonprofits, civil society organizations. And so that's something that resonated with me a lot, strengthening civil society institutions as a way to also contribute to the democratization of our society. And so I was also interested in education, and given that I started volunteering in this NGO, I started, becoming more and more engaged in the nonprofit sector there. I did my master's then in Argentina, a master's in NGOs. And then after working 6 years in different roles, development, education program director, volunteering coordinator, I had many different roles in this organization. I decided to study abroad. I first completed a master's in public policy in Oxford, and then came here to do a PhD, but I did the PhD in international comparative education with a concentration in political science at Teachers College. But I think I knew that I was never going to be a professor full-time or a researcher full-time, because for me, being like Lily said, and connected to the world of social impact, for me it's very strong. It's something that I've always been inclined to, even in different countries, right? I came here to the United States, ended up staying, like many international students sometimes do. Life takes you surprises you with plans that were not there in the first place. And I ended up staying here. And for me, the big transition was more about learning how the nonprofit sector worked here in the United States, which is very different to how we operate in Latin America, at least in the education sector, because of how districts, hire or pay nonprofits to provide services. This is something that in Latin America, you don't see it as often. So there was a learning curve for me. And after working in different education projects, I came to Carnegie Corporation, which is one of the oldest run-making foundations here in the US. And in that role, I have to say, I have a chance to work with so many different nonprofits. And at the same time, I still teach at Teachers College. And actually, I teach a course on international education NGOs, where this course is around the strategies, management and strategies that any, let's say, student that wants to work in international NGOs, at least in the education sector, should know and have. So to this day, I navigate those two worlds, the international NGO sector, the local nonprofit sector, and the university at the same time.
I think
that's
one
so-
thing, I'm sorry.
I
One
was
thing,
just gonna say that's so fascinating. Go on.
yeah, one thing that seemed common between both of y'all's discussion was this process of discernment, right? So thinking about, how did you know, okay, this might not be a good fit. How can I combine things that make for a good fit? And I wonder if you could both hone in a little bit more on that discernment process, right? A lot of our audience might be thinking about, well, is academia a good fit for me? Should I go to a program where that might be more focused on policy work or civil society work? So maybe if you could hone in on your discernment process and thinking through that, how do you make the balance happen? And how did y'all arrive at these different balances, but that fit well, I think, with what you said about y'all's background? So maybe we'll keep the same order. Lily, if you had a thought on the discernment part.
Yeah, I actually kind of like I fell into a PhD program, I feel like I kind of fell into this job teaching as well. Even when I was getting my PhD, it wasn't my intention to go into academia. And I had moved about an hour from here to Charlottesville while I was finishing up my PhD, and I saw a job posting and figured, hey, I might as well try it. And I think it's sometimes easier to start in academia and leave than to start in the nonprofit sector and go into academia afterwards. And so I think the discernment for me is staying here rather than picking one versus the other. And I really like the kind of the direct impact that you see in working in nonprofits. And to me, it's been, I've never wanted to feel really removed or like in that quintessential ivory tower, kind of making judgments on other people, but to really like be in it and helping define programs and deliver services, especially ones that address social equity. And so I think for me, staying here has been those opportunities that I've made through connections with the community. And it's been a struggle at times. And I think bridging those two worlds, and Connie has probably experienced some of this too, right? The expectations that you have in terms of what you're doing with your time and what you produce in a lot of academic settings may be different than someone who has more of like an impact orientation. And so I've had to try to carve that out here a bit. And I think not necessarily just not play the game as it's sometimes expected. And I think there are a lot of people who want to shift what universities are doing to have more of a social impact. So you have to be engaged in trying to change some of those from the inside.
So in my case, I would say that now that I'm a more mature, that I'm very mature, I feel more comfortable wearing all the different hats that I wear without having to explain a lot of why I'm doing all these different things, because I'm not just one thing or another. I'm all these things combined. I have one part of my brain very connected to international NGOs and even smaller nonprofits in Latin America mostly, and a little bit in academia, but I never saw myself like as somebody who would be writing and publishing all day long. Like Lily said, for me, being connected with the real world and with those that are closest to the problems has been a necessity. I don't know. It's inside of me. I need to do that. And actually, in my nonprofit job, let's say, is working in a foundation, which is pretty removed to the actual work that happens or that nonprofits implement. So in a way, working in a foundation, at least for me, the work that we do here, it has also, it's more intellectual also, right? Because we read proposals, we talk about strategies, about ways to solving problems. And so I guess the type of thinker that I am allows me to learn about, many different aspects of the the work that nonprofits do, about different substance matter. So it's a little different to the work that the implementing nonprofits do. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I think that the big decision for me was knowing that I was not going to work in academia. And then maintaining my teaching, job, let's say at Teachers College, allows me to be in contact with, young professionals and other professors. I'm never happy, meaning like I would not be happy if I would just be here, and I would not be entirely happy if it was just at the university.
Connie and Lily, I'm wondering if you've both talked about some of the benefits of being in the different spaces that you're in, a little bit in academia, a little bit out, either interfacing with practitioners or working with NGOs or nonprofits directly. And I'm curious if you see the impact of your work being different in the academic space versus in the nonprofit space, and how do you characterize that impact in each part of it? So if it makes sense to start with Connie, you were on the roll there, we can reverse it, and Connie, you can answer first and give Lily a moment to think.
Sure. So given that the work that I do at teachers' colleges around I teach two classes. One is around the experiences of Latinx students in urban schools here in the US, and the other one is on international NGOs. I feel that my impact in academia right now has to do more with mentoring students and teaching them, of course, but also providing them with the support that they need to understand or to think about what their future might look like in terms of their jobs and their professions. Whereas the impact that I have here at the foundation has more to do with enabling resources and providing also some type of technical assistance to our grantees. I have always been very interested in one particular aspect of nonprofits, which is strategy and organizational development, which I think it's key to the organizational sustainability of these organizations. And so I think that's how I think, and I hope to be making an impact in these two different worlds.
Great. And Lily?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's harder to capture your impact in academia because it's removed, right? So we teach students and we give them the skills that they need to think critically and analytically, to evaluate research and ask good questions around how do we know if something's working or not working, and then you hope that they take that out into the world with them in a variety of different jobs. And then also I think with publication, if you're thinking about traditional academic publications, you're relying on other people then to take what you've written and translate that into practice, right? Like, maybe it just won't even be read at all, who knows, right? And when you're working more directly with community stakeholders, I think it's really driven by kind of their interests and their problems if you're doing it well, and that the work and the research and the time you're spending is able to have more of an impact as long as it's done in a participatory way, right? So that you're reflecting their needs. But to me, and not all my recommendations are implemented, right? But I think it's much more obvious in terms of, even if the needle is small sometimes, that there's an impact on a greater number of people served because you've written a major grant for an organization, or they're implementing practices that are based on evidence-based research, right? Or you're helping them demonstrate their results through program evaluation. That helps with sustainability, right, and diversifying their revenue streams. And so I think that the impact is much more, I think, obvious and tangible if you're in the nonprofit sector than kind of removed but influencing it.
Great, that's super, super helpful and very interesting for our students. And I'm curious to hear, you've given a little bit about how you knew whether or not being in academia only or being in an NGO only or nonprofit only was right for you. And I'm curious if there's a way that you would recommend for either faculty looking to transition or for graduate students considering nonprofit work, how might they start to think about which of these career paths or the balance in these careers is the right fit for them? And Lily, we can start with you. We'll just reverse it all.
Yeah, so I have to say, I work with graduate students, but they're largely master's students, and few of them go on to get their doctorate. So most of them are already oriented towards having more applied careers, and not so much in academia, though we get a few of those sometimes. I think really, knowing the kind of organizational context that might work well for you, right? So being in a big space, and universities come in different sizes too, right? But being in a big space versus with lots of people versus in a small organization where you work really more intimately with folks is helpful, right? So are you someone who likes being involved in lots of different things at once, right? So Connie and I have both talked about wearing lots of hats at the same time, which can be great and like keep you engaged in learning new things, but it can also be really exhausting. I think it's hard to have good work-life balance when not only in academia, but then when you're trying to play all these different roles. I think that multiplies this pressure to do more and do more. Whereas I think one of the nice things in nonprofits is that often the focus, like you get a little bit more of a focus on one particular area, depending on the nonprofit that you're in. And for people who kind of thrive more on fixed schedules and knowing their tasks, right, then you can have some more of that versus having an academic schedule. Is great that it's super flexible, but there's always something to do and always work to do. And it can be hard to have that balance.
You always owe somebody a draft. That's what I've been told. Connie, how about you?
Sure. So I think that could you repeat the question because I was like listening to Lily, but repeat the question again, please.
Yeah.
Which means maybe I didn't answer it well, Connie.
No, I think
Because
Or
it
my other one.
resonated with me. It resonated with me, and then I got lost in the thought. So remind me, Sarah, the question, please.
yeah. How would you advise faculty maybe
Yes.
looking to transition careers or graduate
Sure.
students considering nonprofit work to find out if a nonprofit is a good fit or if academia might be the right place for them?
Sure. Thank you. Now I remember. Okay. So I also have master students. So for my master students, many of them, so you know that maybe out of 22 will go on to complete and start in PhDs. So for my students, it might be a little different because they're not doctoral students, right? So they come to Teachers College and because they want to work usually in the NGO sector. But one piece of advice that I would have is there are many roles in nonprofits, and like Lily said, it depends on the nonprofit and the NGO. There are so many different types of organizations where they need the kind of skills that doctoral students and doctors have, researchers have, for monitoring, for evaluation, for data-related positions, for strategy positions, that those kinds of skills are needed and very important. So I think that for those folks that might not be interested in the publication, let's say, stress of having to be publishing continuously, maybe that's a good fit for folks with those kinds of skills, but that do not want to, work in academia. And then I would also like to make a comment for international students who are thinking of going back to their countries. And it also depends on the region, but in other regions, let's take the example of maybe Latin America. Even for PhDs, that there are not many full-time professors, right? In other in universities, let's say in Latin American countries, and so oftentimes you see professors by unfortunately, because there are not many full-time roles as professors, they usually work in both sectors at the same time. It depends on the university and it depends on the country as well. But for many folks, is not a choice. It's sort of a natural career path, I would say.
And that's happening here too, right? In the US, as we shift to more contingent adjunct work, people are coming out with PhDs and there's not the labor market to support them.
And that's kind of where I wanted to shift the conversation in our last couple of minutes, is that we've talked a lot about what we would here characterize as vocation, right? Thinking about what your role in society is, how that combines, how you can combine your interests with your work, with your career, with how you think you fit within this system. And then Connie, you were finishing up that answer, and then Lily contributed with the practical reality of, well, we have to go do something, right? And so for kind of faculty and graduate students thinking about, okay, I want to dip my toes into this, I kind of see this as a two-part question. One, like, what should their first step be? And then two, who should they seek out mentorship or advice from, right? A lot of times, sometimes the dissertation, your dissertation chair is going to have more expertise in one area, or your master's advisor in one area, and maybe not in the nonprofit space. So just thinking about the practical mechanics, what's the first step to dip toes in? And then who do you go to for advice? Lily, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I do want to say first, yes, while some people fall back into the nonprofit world because perhaps they can't get a job in academia, I think too often academia, we see it as the lesser choice. And so I think we need to reframe that too, right? That when we think about the kinds of jobs that our graduate students or undergraduate students aspire to, academia is not somehow better than any other career choice, right? And again, often we're not actually doing the real work of improving society. So I just had to say that, to make that clear that that's not my position, that you do it just because you can't do something else. We just happen not also to have the labor market for everyone who wants an academic job. So who can you go to? I would say if you're a graduate student or a faculty member and you're looking for someone in your university, I would say find someone who does applied research, where that's their kind of orientation, where you can tell that they have this kind of straddling those two worlds like Connie and I have talked about, right? Where yes, they may be in a university, but they also do work either on boards or they do research that's more grounded and applied and community-based. Reach out to your adjunct faculty who most likely have other kinds of jobs too, right? And see what their connections are. I think also faculty who are engaged in work-based learning opportunities for students. So they're the ones who are running internship programs, right? They're going to naturally have these different kinds of ties and connections with the community that other professors might not have as much of. So I think those are good people to look for. And then I would say alumni networks too. Okay, so looking at who's part of your alumni network on LinkedIn, the kinds of jobs that they have and what seems to resonate, right? If you come across someone, you're like, ooh, that seems like a cool job, or that seems like a cool organization, right? I think alums naturally, I shouldn't say naturally, often want to give back, right? And kind of engage with other people from their universities. And so I think that makes a really good venue of saying that kind of job looks interesting to me. I'm going to reach out and ask them how they got there and have an informational interview for example, not about a particular job, but about career paths and how you get into this.
Bonnie,
I would say within the university, that's one approach, and then looking for alumni who may be tied to the sectors you want to explore more.
Bonnie, why don't you wrap us up with thoughts about mentorship and getting started?
Yes, I think I agree with Lily. I would add that for first, let's say for master students, right, for graduate students in their first year, I would and that's what I advise my students to, look for internships during the summer or take classes that include some kind of experiential component or research partnership with nonprofits or NGOs abroad, so that they can start having a taste of what it looks like to work for the NGO or nonprofit sector. Also searching for the right mentors, and usually, or not usually, sorry, sometimes the right mentor at your university is not necessarily your advisor. So being, very strategic about what professors or right, like Lily was saying, maybe adjunct professors make more sense, have the type of jobs and connections that you're interested in, and also reach out to the Career Center, right, at the university. They should provide students also with ideas on how to start informational interviews, which I think that is very important for who doesn't want to help a student who wants to learn about what the world of nonprofits looks like. I usually talk to everybody who reaches out to me to ask questions about, careers in the nonprofit and NGO sector. Ask questions and do internships. And maybe sometimes, these graduate students and even doctoral students have skills that nonprofits need.
Yeah.
Let's do not forget that. So those are very important skills that students need to, sell in a way and market. So I don't know if I added new information, but I guess I agree with Lily.
No, I think
Can
that's
I
important.
add to William
Yes,
that
please.
don't limit yourself just to reaching out to one or two people, right? Because folks are going to have really different perspectives. And so, we sometimes hear of students who reach out to a professor, right? And it doesn't go well, or they don't share their interests and they stop there, right? It's like a wall. And so I think especially for students who are from kind of under-resourced backgrounds or who might be from underrepresented backgrounds, right? It sort of presents in this wall of not being open to these kinds of discussions. And there's a lot of diversity in folks who are in academia. So just trying.
And I think the kind of overall essence that we got from this session was two things. One, right, thinking about where you fit on this spectrum of integrating nonprofit with potentially academic careers. And then this last theme, which was a lot about valuing connections, right? So seeing individuals that work on campus as potential valuable resources, people that have important things to say, and similarly off campus, and looking at that broadly and respecting those types of opinions. So I think those are both two good takeaways for the session.